You've heard it said that storytelling is everything. But what if everything is storytelling? What if every action we take, every word we speak, every thought we think is a story? If so, then we all need to be better storytellers, because the story we tell will determine the impact we make in our lives, in our work, and in our dreams. I'm Jonathan Jordan, your storytelling coach, and this is Everything is Storytelling, a podcast for people obsessed with story. Hello, everyone. So today's episode is going to be a little bit different from what you're normally used to, but I just released my new book, Start with Story: How Great Storytellers Transform Ideas into Impact. And so I thought it would be really fun to break away from the normal thing today and instead provide you with a preview of the upcoming audiobook version. So the audiobook is taking longer to produce than originally anticipated. There are some issues we're working out with some of the editing and just getting some of the content in the best shape that it can be for listeners, but it is on its way. But I thought, you know what? Let's go ahead and release this version of Chapter 1 so that you can go ahead and enjoy it here on the show. So that being said, no further ado, enjoy Chapter 1 of Start with Story. Chapter 1: Why You Don't Start with Why. Around 2017 AD is when I first saw Simon Sinek's now ubiquitous Start with Why TED Talk. The talk and his corresponding book launched Sinek to the forefront as a thought leader in purpose-driven leadership. This was the perfect time for me to see the talk because I had just dedicated my willpower to starting up my writing business. I had selected a name and built a shoddy free website, but I still felt a little lost on what exactly I wanted to do. Finding my why changed everything. It gave me a vision for the story I wanted to write with my work to help others find their inner storytellers. Fast forward to today, and Start with Why has become a bit of a hackneyed statement. What once felt fresh and exciting became a corporate cliche as everyone jumped on the why bandwagon. Granted, it's not a terrible bandwagon. You should think about and find your purpose. Your why adds meaning to every facet of life. It transforms your perspective and injects positivity into decision making. I'm a huge fan of this particular bandwagon. But sometimes even a good bandwagon can be steered in the wrong direction. Aspiring authors who are writing the why bandwagon believe this is where their book should start, with their why. What people forget is that your why is for you, not for your audience. For over 3 years, I drove Uber to make ends meet. Our family was in a terrible financial situation, which was mostly caused by one poor decision I had made to start a business I had no business doing. But none of my Uber riders climbed into my car because they cared about my financial situation. They climbed into my car because they had a destination to get to. Period. Sometimes riders asked why I Ubered. Rarely was I 100% honest with them. I was ashamed of the financial situation that had led me to this point. So instead, I'd say stuff like, "Oh, it's a great way to make side income on the weekends," or "Our family loves Disney and this is my Disney money." Was there some truth in these statements? Sure, but these reasons were never the whole story. Still, this would occasionally lead to a more generous tip from a fellow Disney adult. Some of the more empathetic writers likely saw the pain underlying my incomplete answer. But my why for driving Uber was never the reason they got into the car. Your audience is the passenger. They have their own destination they want to reach. You're the driver. It's your job to get them to their destination. Your story is the vehicle. And this is why you don't start your book with your why. Instead, you start with story. Story puts who before why. Once you know your audience clearly, you can also define where they want to go. Then you tell the story that will help them reach their destination. Identifying your who is all about knowing your audience and meeting their needs first. I wouldn't read 50 Shades of Grey to my kids. Frankly, I wouldn't read it at all. But I do read Harry Potter and the Narnia books to them, because who informs the story you tell. Your why is for you. It's internal, an invisible force driving you forward. It may even be motivating you to help people with your insights. But story is external. It invites people in, makes them enjoy the ride. Story empowers people to move from point A to point Z. Or, if you're Canadian, point Z. Most importantly, story closes the gap between you and your audience. Before you can transform an idea into impact, you have to recognize the huge chasm between your why and their why. You're further along than they are. They don't yet know what you know, so you can't ask them to run before they learn to crawl. Story becomes the bridge from their why to yours, empowering you to lead them across step by step, putting the why in story. Again, I'm not anti-why at all. In fact, you can't spell story without why. When I first agreed to assist a coworker with publishing her book in 2018, I was still wrestling with my desire to be a professional writer. I worried I was settling by helping someone else publish their book instead of developing my own ideas. But then I had a wild discovery. Helping people tell their stories was fun. When I found my who, it actually reignited my why. I started writing a new chapter for my career. Now, confession time. No one directly taught me how to be a book editor or ghostwriter. I taught myself by pulling out my old work, a rusty experimental novel, and a mixture of poetry written during my angsty college days, and cleaning it up. Most of the writing was pretty awful, especially the poetry. By practicing on my own writing first, it saved me from making mistakes with clients. Well, the worst mistakes, at least. It wasn't until 2020 that I would become a bona fide book coach by entering into a freelance arrangement with a legit publisher. On my third ghostwriting project for the publisher, an interesting problem cropped up. We were about halfway through writing the manuscript when I received an email from my client. Hey, could we add this into the chapter you're working on? He had written about a page and a half of content, expanding on some of the ideas we had discussed on our most recent call. My initial internal dilemma sounded something like this. Does this mean I'm failing as a ghostwriter? Am I no longer needed? Do I need to deduct this part of the word count from my fee? Of course, I included what he wrote in the book, though I edited the passage first for a more seamless flow. Over the rest of the project, he continued to send me his own personal tidbits to throw in. But I still wrestled with what this meant for me as his ghostwriter, if not all of the book was ghostwritten. By the end of our work together, I realized what he and I had done together was pretty remarkable. Through our conversations and the revisions process, I helped him find and embrace his inner storyteller. Where once he had planned to completely outsource the writing process, he had been spurred on to take more ownership in the book. This wasn't a slight on my abilities. If anything, it was praise. Since then, many of my projects have followed a similar pattern. Sometimes I'm starting with a loose outline. Other times, I inherit a messy, unfinished manuscript by the author to use as inspiration. Either way, the author ends up co-creating with me, adding in their touches along the way, which is why ghostwriting should never be called cheating when you're authoring a book. Most people don't realize how intimately involved the authors are in the process. The book is 100% their ideas, and you'd be surprised how much of their own writing ends up in the finished project. Usually, my clients have come to me with a very clear why for their book, but they didn't always know their who, and often they were lost on the how. This combination meant they weren't confident in their story. So, since we're talking about whys, this is my why. I love helping people find their inner storyteller. I love helping people put the why in their story. It's been more fun than I ever could have imagined to help dozens of authors transform ideas into impact through the power of story. They've gone from feeling storyless to embracing their inner storyteller. And so will you. Redefining story. I'm not a natural storyteller. One of my earliest editing clients said this to me on our first call. Before too long, I discovered he actually was a natural storyteller. In fact, I can count on one finger how many of my clients were not natural storytellers. And yet, even then, we found ways to use storytelling to better communicate his why and deliver his ideas with the greatest impact. What's been truly surprising for me is discovering how lost the natural storytellers felt about how to tell their story. You would think they'd be able to do this with no issues. But most of the time, they didn't yet recognize their inner storyteller or the power waiting to be unleashed. A major reason for this mindset is many people have too narrow a view of what story means. Some common objections and my responses. But I'm writing a nonfiction book, so why would I need stories? With this objection, story is being limited to the realm of fiction, making it synonymous with make-believe and untruth. But I would argue story is a vessel for truth and beliefs in both fiction and nonfiction. The best fiction rings true because the story holds universal truth. The best nonfiction rings true because the story transforms ideas into impact. You know it's true. But why would I share my personal life in a business book? No one cares about that stuff. With this objection, story is being defined more like a memoir. These authors are undervaluing their own experience and how it has shaped their insights. Once again, it's too narrow a view of storytelling. The divisions we create between personal and professional are arbitrary, artificial, and antiquated. People no longer care only about what you do, but who you are. People do business with people, and people love stories. I want to be informative and help others, not talk about myself. With this objection, story is being defined as self-serving. This statement is a case of mistaken humility, where they are afraid of sounding egotistical and narcissistic. But in my experience, the people who use this objection the most are pretty much never egotistical or narcissistic. Often, the best way to serve someone is by sharing your firsthand experience. Why do you think reviews are so important? They are many stories of whether a product was helpful or not. The root problem is rarely about whether you are a natural storyteller or not. probably in how you are defining story itself. Story is not only a series of events saying this happened and then this happened. That's called a sequence. Sequences play a role in storytelling, but they are not the story itself. The true essence of story is rooted in your unique perspective, your voice, the special sauce that makes you who you are. In fact, story integrates mind, body, and spirit. How so? Because story thrives at the intersection of your purpose, your spirit, your experience, body, and your ideas, mind. In the broader context of humanity, story is part of our metaphysical DNA, which is why we all have an inner storyteller. Redefining storyteller. The obstacle faced by so many would-be storytellers is how their limited definition of story leads them to remove themselves from their insights. And then they wonder why their insights have no power. Thus, the reason it becomes easy to believe I'm not a natural storyteller. But let's think for a second about some of the world's foremost storytellers. Shakespeare, Walt Disney, Oprah, Steve Jobs. Each of them told stories in different ways. We think of Shakespeare as a more traditional storyteller because he was a playwright. But he wasn't only a playwright writing fiction. He was also a poet, and poetry is nonfiction. With the notable exceptions of epic poems like Homer's Odyssey or the Epic of Gilgamesh. Side note, we really need a contemporary epic poem, people. Though maybe Hamilton qualifies? I think it does. Getting back to Shakespeare, some of his most famous plays were histories that bordered on non-fiction. Plays like Richard III or Henry V could be viewed as a source of historical education for the audience, akin to today's biopic movie. Even the Scottish play, aka Macbeth, it is at least based on a true story, despite its supernatural touches. As for Uncle Walt, you might think of classics like Bambi or Mary Poppins, but the famed filmmaker won 10 of his 26 Academy Awards for documentary films. And anyone who has visited a Disney park can attest to how storytelling is woven into everything from the architecture to the food. Oprah Winfrey is a storyteller on multiple fronts, from her talk show to her book club. The running theme of her career has been lifting up the voices and stories of others. Yes, even giving a platform to others is a form of storytelling. And we can't leave out the late Steve Jobs, whose own life was storied, to say the least. Love him or hate him, you can't deny his ability to wield story through the lens of business. He was a master at transforming ideas into impact, especially at Apple. And while he had less of a direct influence as the owner of Pixar, his touch can still be seen in the consistently strong storytelling which forms the central pillar of the studio's brand. All well and good, you might say, but I'm not any of those titans of storytelling. Why not, though? What really makes you any different from them? Shakespeare got his cougar girlfriend pregnant, leading to the late 1500s version of a shotgun wedding. Walt Disney's first business went bankrupt. Jobs was publicly ousted from the company he started. Oprah was the daughter of a teenage mom and was a pregnant teen herself. These aren't gods and saints we're talking about. These could be the stories of anyone in your neighborhood or anyone sitting next to you on a plane. They didn't become storytellers because of what happened to them. They became storytellers despite what happened to them. Everyone has a story, which means anyone can be a storyteller. A limited view of storytelling may be causing you to undervalue your own story. Many aspiring authors are fixated on sharing their knowledge and building authority, yet cagey about sharing their own story. They are compartmentalizing. They are failing to see how knowledge and experience are not substitutes for story. They are the direct outputs of your story. So you need to redefine both story and storyteller if you are to unleash your inner storyteller. Even if you are presenting a book rooted in how-to info, full of bulleted lists and prescriptive steps, story still plays a major role. Ask yourself, where is this information coming from? All your ideas, insights, and how-to advice stems directly from your purpose and your experience. What makes the info valuable isn't just the outcome created, but where and who it came from within you. It's your story. While we still have Shakespeare on the mind, imagine an actor on stage. The story is the actor. The information you're sharing is their costume. Remove the actor and the costume falls to the floor. Useless. Remove your story and the same happens with the information you want to share. It falls to the wayside. Useless. Which is why finding your inner storyteller is so essential for the viability of your message. No one will tell your story exactly the way you can, which makes story the key component to transforming your ideas into impact. Transforming ideas into impact. As a book coach, I've helped clients dig deep, find their inner storyteller, and bring their story to the surface. Their why stays intact within them, but bringing the story to the forefront is what attracts their who. An idea only transforms into impact when it passes from you to your who, that is, your audience. The impact you create will vary depending on what your individual goals are. If you're not sure what those goals are yet, here are some outcomes for my clients who found their inner storyteller. They attracted new customers to their business. They generated new revenue streams. They reached bestseller status. They transitioned their career. They launched businesses. They scored speaking gigs. And they changed lives. Any of those align with your why? If so, then you've come to the right place. Or should I say the right place? Sorry, but not sorry for the puns. Once you've found your inner storyteller, your story will empower an idea to transform into impact. So here's a quick preview of the discussions to follow. How the art of storytelling is actually a science. How to center the reader's experience in your book. How to filter and qualify whether a story is helpful or not. The story types you can leverage so you don't run out of ideas. Storytelling concepts you can mold to your message and personality. And the common myths and mistakes to avoid in storytelling. Now, let's return to why. When you combine your why, your who, and your how, you'll tap into the full power of story. Your inner storyteller will be unstoppable as you transform ideas into impact. Through story, you'll attract the kind of people who want to work with you and who you want to work with. So let's go find your inner storyteller. Let's start with story together. All right, I hope you enjoyed that preview of Start with Story. I don't know yet when the full audiobook is going to be available, but I promise it is on its way. So in the meantime, if you have not done so, you can go ahead and go grab the ebook, the paperback, or the hardcover version of the book. You can get all those on Amazon, of course. So I'll have the link down in the show notes to make it really, really easy for you to go grab a copy. I'm incredibly grateful for the support that the book has received so far. People have been sending me some really kind messages about how the book has helped them with their own storytelling. So I'm excited to see what this book is going to do and just help people be able to unleash their inner storytellers. So in the meantime, go grab your copy and keep changing the world one story at a time.